Well, welcome everyone back to day two of our CEO's Declutter Should Do workshop series. I'm excited if you're here, whether you joined us for day one or not. This is the place to be if you want to redeem your time, if you want to make the best use of it, right? If you want to stop chasing your should-do list all day long. And who has this happen to you? You get to the end of the day and you're like, what did I do all day long, right? You're exhausted. So, you spent your time and your energy somewhere, but you're working really hard, right? Maybe there are piles behind you, this, weight that you've left behind you as you've been going from one thing to the next. Maybe you even see some check marks, right? But you're really not seeing the fruit. And that's, I don't know about you, but I'm not looking to do a whole lot of something for nothing, right? And so we want to be fruitful in what it is we're doing and not just be busy, just going in circles and things like that. So that's what I'll be focusing on today as we move forward into day two of our series. So if you're just joining us for the first time today, feel free to drop the name of your business and what you do in the chat so we can get to know you. And if you were on yesterday and you did that and you want to share it again today, you're more than welcome to do that as well. But here's what I want to tell you coming in today. Regardless of what you do or how long you've been doing it, like we talked about yesterday, the key to going from that random busyness to faithful fruitfulness does not start in what you do, right? Does not start in what you do. Yes, we're going to talk about what you do and don't do today, but we had to talk about yesterday first, because if we didn't figure out who we were and what we're called to, then we were going to get
How do you?
by all the things that we could be doing, that we should be doing, right? So yesterday, your CEO implementation action was to identify an untrue belief that you have been thinking and probably believing to some level, maybe a lot or a little, or maybe you didn't even realize it, around you and your ability to be the CEO of your business. So as I was looking through, some of the ones that were shared inside of the community, I think you're gonna be able to resonate with so many of these. Others are way better at this than I am. Wow, right? Anyone ever thought that? I should just let other people do this, right? They've obviously got this figured out. They've got a system. They're successful. We don't need one more fill in the blank, right? How about this one? I don't know enough to lead such a huge program or a big team or have such a big vision or fill in the blank with whatever feels really big for you, right? How about this? I'm constantly distracted by shiny objects and I don't finish the goals that I start. Anyone relate, right? Like, yeah, why am I even trying then, right? Or how about this one? Everything in my business depends on me, and there's not enough time in the day or of me in the day. So kind of a why bother? Why am I wasting my time, right? And these are all versions in some way of the untrue belief we looked at yesterday, which is I am not enough, right? And so when we start looking at that, the first step is to identify it, because so often we're thinking that, but we're not actually recognizing it, identifying it, calling it out. And if we're not calling it out, guess what? It just keeps cycling, just keeps cycling, just keeps cycling in the background. Maybe you say these things out loud sometimes. Maybe this is what comes out of your mouth when you're talking to someone else sometimes. That's a great, kind of way to notice, what am I thinking? What comes out of my mouth? But a lot of times, especially for those of us who are solopreneurs and it's kind of me, myself, and I, it's just going on in our heads, right? But like we talked about yesterday, if we don't take those thoughts captive, then where are those thoughts going to steer our emotions and then our execution of action or inaction and our results? Most of us said that we would end up on the hamster wheel, right? We would end up, just trying to do all these things because we're overwhelmed by the gap that we see and we're trying to overcome it, right? And that really isn't going to get us anywhere either. And so we decided that our first number one CEO task, regardless of how many things are on your to-do list, is to build your belief in you as a CEO with God before you go to, and what am I doing today? Or, and what am I doing this week? Because if you don't do that, then everything's going to sound good. Everything's going to be shiny. Everything's going to be distracting. Everything's going to feel important, right? And you're going to be everywhere and end up being nowhere. And then you're going to get nowhere. And so when we take our time to do that daily CEO meeting with him, that's where we check in on what have I been thinking and believing? And I hope that you will take that steer belief map that I shared with you yesterday. Again, it's really simple. Just write the letters STEER vertically. And in your time with the Lord, like hey, what have I been thinking or believing right now? Or what's a situation that I'm really feeling some struggle or some overwhelm or some angst or frustration or whatever around, and do a steer belief map on that. See what's coming up where you are, grab his truth, and then see, where that directs you, how that redirects you. And you're going to feel the shift from the inside out, right? Like I literally yesterday, as we did this, when we were looking at, the I am not enough, I felt my body like sinking down, the weight of that, right? The weight of like, how am I going to overcome this? But when we really looked at his truth that he is enough and that he has created us for what he's called us to, there was a lightness. Yes, it didn't take away all those other things, but it changed our perspective. And that's really where we're wanting to be. Now, I want to make sure that we've got this really, really clear. Some of you were on live yesterday. Some of you were not. Some of you may have listened to the replay yesterday. Some of you may not have yet. That's okay. It's still hanging out there, so you can still grab it. But what's really important is that we are talking about the same thing. So do you remember how we defined what a CEO is? It is not just a chief executive officer like the world defines it, although that is part of our job description. But more importantly, it is being the Christ-empowered operator of a with God business. And that's where it's focused on who we are in him and how he's working through us, not our CEO resume, right? His CEO resume. He created the world. He keeps it spinning. He keeps the stars, the moon, the sun in their place. He, keeps the seasons coming. He, all these things are completely in his control, right? And so when we are doing this with him, then it doesn't matter that I feel like I'm not enough, because he is enough, right? And even this morning, as I was in my CEO meeting with God, right, he knew I need to hear that again. Because even though I'm teaching you on this, I'm still on this journey of like, these thoughts and things get in my head. And he brought me to Ephesians 3:20-21, which I love. Now to him who is able to do far more abundantly. There's 3 superlatives for any of my English majors out there. Way, 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 way more than we could ask or think. Anything better than I could even think to ask him, or like think to dream up, or like come up with on my own, right? According to his power that's at work in us, right? There's the with God part. To him be the glory forever and ever. Amen, right? Amen. So I want to ask you, as you're coming in today, is your CEO level of belief more than it was yesterday? I hope it's not less, right? Maybe it's kind of feeling like you're just kind of at that same place, but like, I want you to be able to say, yes, I feel it's growing. Now, scale of 1 to 10, you may be like, yeah, Alyssa, I'm like, I was a 3 and maybe I'm kind of like a 5 now. Or maybe like, I was, a 6 and maybe I'm like an 8. And, sometimes I think we have to arrive at 10 and that's when we will have arrived. But I just want to remind you, we will never probably fully be a 10. Right? Because we still have our flesh. We still have this part of us that doubts, even with the greatest of faith, even when we see all the things God does, because we're human, which is why we have to keep coming back to him to get to truth, to listen to his voice and let him steer our thoughts, emotions, and then our actions and our results. Because otherwise, left to ourselves, what's going to happen? We're going to drift right back, right? That's why it's this consistent thing. It may be a daily thing. It may be an hourly thing. It may be a moment by moment thing. So don't feel bad if you have to just pause and say, I need to check in on what I'm thinking and believing right now, because I'm feeling some emotions that don't feel like they're going to take me in the right direction. So he wants us to come to him. He wants us to ask because he wants to be able to do exceedingly abundantly beyond all that we could ask or imagine. So before we go any further, let's stop and pray and invite him to be part of what we're doing today and to guide our time. Lord, thank you that you are with us and that you are capable and that you are not just enough, but you are more than enough. And that you have shown over and over again your faithfulness. Forgive us for our forgetfulness, where we've seen your hand work and then we've gone right back to doing things our own way and our own strength and our own wisdom. God, I thank you that you choose to work with us and in us, and that you want to do exceedingly abundantly beyond all that we could ask or imagine, because that's what gives you the glory. And so, Lord, as we think about our businesses today and who you've called us to be, and then next, what you've called us to do in them, and all the other things we think we should be doing, I pray that you'll give us discernment. I pray that you'll help us to see what is ours to do and what is not ours to do, and then to step out and take action on what it is that you've showed us today. So thank you for each person who's here today live or listening to the replay. And thank you for the work that you are going to do in our hearts and in our businesses. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. All right. Well, I'm excited about this. And here was a really another cool thing that happened last night. We're going to talk tomorrow about like how we look at our time and when we do things, when we work and when we don't. So I'm going to give you a quick little preview. You heard me mention this morning in my CEO time with God. That's my morning refill. Last night, I worked up until the time that I had decided, and I was not done, not ready for this at all. Not, like totally like I should not be going to bed. That was literally how I felt. But I knew that I knew that I knew I was done. My brain was mush. My body was starting to, go, I'm tired and we just need to get some sleep and we'll, come back tomorrow. And so I have, I part of what I do in my evening refill is, I get my skincare done and then I crawl into bed and I turn on my reading light and I have a book next to my book stand. And I'll be honest, the last several days, I have not picked up that book because I've been working too late trying to get ready for all of this. But last night I just felt the Lord say, you need to pick this up. And I picked that up, and in it, the author talked about the fact that the work that God has started, he is going to complete. And I literally had already put this in my notes to remind us of Philippians 1, it's kind of over a couple of verses between 6 to 11 that says, and I'm sure of this, that he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Christ Jesus. And it's my prayer that your love may abound more and more with knowledge and discernment. Who needs discernment, right? So that, I love this, you may approve what is excellent, what's good, what we should be choosing, and so be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through him to the glory and praise of God. And so it was like between me, I literally just looked at that in my notes. Then I went and picked up this book that I hadn't picked up in days. And it was that reminder. He started the good work, right, in me when he invited me into relationship with him, right? He will complete the good work completely when he returns. And, I'm not having to deal with all the struggles and the sin and all of that and spend eternity with him. But in this in-between part, right, in the already, the not yet, he is going to continue the good work as I walk with him. I often say, like, he could have saved us and whisked us to heaven immediately, and yet he didn't. He still gave us this time in the in-between. And in that is where he wants us to grow in love and knowledge and discernment so that we know him and so that we are making him known with others. And so that's what being a CEO is all about, like that I'm not complete on my own, that I recognize I'm under construction. I'm never going to have arrived this side of heaven. So when we struggle with the doubt, the discouragement, the disappointments, right, we look to him, the one who is doing the work, not to ourselves trying to do the work, because we will never fully be able to do this. And here's what she said in the book. She said this, she said, no matter what life or business looks like, right, we can confidently rest in the promise of our Father who says, I will complete the work I have started, because he is shaping something spectacular in you, something significant. The work is already underway. And I love this. The good news is God always finishes what he starts, right? Who is glad that it's not in our hands, it's not up to us, because I would have dropped the ball a really long time ago in every area of my life, including my business, right? But we get to partner with God and with other CEOs, with other women who are also really wanting to seek after what it is that he's called us to in our life and in our business. So that way we can take this in-between time and go from that random busyness of it's just kind of, taking me in circles on the hamster wheel to the faithful fruitfulness where it's not hurried, it's not rushed. I'm not trying to do all the things. I'm not shiny object syndrome all day long, but it's consistently being poured out and into where it is that I'm called to. And that comes with this, what I call withness, this with God and then with others who are doing the same thing. So if with is something that resonates with you and you don't want to do this alone, I want you to drop the word with in the chat. And that way I know that you're, those of you who are here live are still with me. So speaking of withness, have you popped in the Redeemer Time community? Right? That's where you're going to find daily reminders and session replays and our CEO implementation action steps, right? And you're also going to have an opportunity to get some individualized coaching and find accountability and connection and community. We all need that, right? Especially for those of us who are solopreneurs, right? Or maybe just have a really small team, but they're all, virtual somewhere else, because it can get really lonely. So make sure that you pop in the community, because that's not going away when the workshop is done. So that's one way that you can continue to keep this stuff top of mind and top of heart, right? But I also have some good news for you today before we dive into day 2, is that I made a decision that tomorrow is not the last day, right? So I decided with God to add 2 bonus sessions that are going to help continue to give you some extra support around what you're learning. Okay, so real quick, on Friday, the 12th, same time, 12 o'clock Central Time, we are going to have a CEO open house, and we're going to focus on connection and why CEOs don't go it alone, right? Why they don't do life and business alone. And I'm going to let you kind of take a peek behind the closed doors and hear from some in real life CEOs who are using the Redeem Her Time truth and time management tools that we put together to make the best use of our time in life and business and experience fruitfulness. So that's going to be on Friday, April 12th. Would love to have you join us for that. And then on Saturday morning, I wanted to just kind of create one extra time where you and I could just kind of be face-to-face where we can talk about where it is that you need to go next. And so it's going to be a Q&A implementation session, right? We're going to talk about how CEOs make decisions and take action with purpose. And so this is the opportunity for this not to be just one more workshop that just went in one year and out the other, right? One more thing that you took great notes in, and then it gets, buried in a pile of things on your desk. One more thing that you say, oh, I should do this, and then you never get around to it, right? I'm going to have you bring your questions, your challenges, your coffee. We're going to roll up our sleeves and get to work, and I will be wearing my custom CEO sweatshirt, which is the way we define it. I've had a gal on Etsy that's designed it for us, and I'll share the link with that. And this is open to anyone who wants to be able to come and ask some questions and figure out where it is next for you to focus, especially those of you who maybe during the week can't be on live. Hopefully a Saturday morning. It's going to happen at 10 a.m. Saturday morning. If I said that, I'm going to make it possible for you. So make sure you mark your calendars to join us tomorrow for day 3. And then on Friday for the open house at 12, and on Saturday for the implementation Q&A session at 10. So we're going to keep the party going, the momentum going, right? We don't want to have all this excitement going and then just drop the ball. We want to keep growing, right? So if you want to keep growing, grow in the chat, and we will dive into day 2. So do you have your workbook? I gotta grab mine up here. Okay. I was actually writing some stuff down in here to make sure that my thoughts were going alongside of what we're doing. For those of you who are on live, let me grab the link and put it in the chat. So if you don't have it in front of you, you can do that and at least get a digital copy in front of you. If you've registered for the workshop at redeemhertime.com/declutter, then you should have a link in an inbox waiting for you. It's also inside the community for those of you who are listening to the replay. So yesterday, we talked about day 1, and we're focusing on confidence, right? Confidence in who you are, more importantly, who he says you are as a CEO. But the day 1 problem is there are too many things on our should-do list. And what happens when we have too many things on our should-do list, right? Because we're feeling like we're not enough, it starts eclipsing everything else. And we talked about the fact that the real problem is not what's on the list, although we're going to address that today, but why it's there. Because if we keep listening to those same voices, what's going to happen? Whether it's the world, the enemy, the gurus out there who want to sell us all their stuff, or even our own voice, we're going to keep just adding more things to our should-do list. We may clean it up for a time, right? But it's just going to get cluttered again. Think about your closet. Who has a closet that needs to be cleaned out right now, right? You could go in there. We'll talk about this in a minute. You could go in there and you could just organize it. You could, have pretty bins and labels and all these things and rehang everything on the hangers and, put it in the right order so that you've got, your categories and stuff like that. But chances are over time, what's going to happen? It's going to go from order to disorder, right? Because you never really got to the root problem, which is that you had too much stuff in there, right? And you had things in there that were not serving you in, for example, if it's your clothes, right? Not serving you, as my friend Ashleana says, in your right now body and with the right now places that you were being called to show up. Okay, so we don't want to keep doing the same thing because it's just going to go right back to where it was. So that's why we are focusing on whose voice we're listening to, right? Whose resume are we building? Yes, we want to do things with excellence, but it's because of what he's doing in us. And it's not about us being enough, but about him being more than enough. But the problem is that our eyes, our ears, our hearts, we get distracted, right? We get distracted by all those voices. And then we just keep adding more things to the should do, or we take things off and they come back on. And so we want to make sure that we're listening to his voice, which leads us to the question we had yesterday. Do you believe that you're the CEO that he says you are? Sorry about that. Got something in my throat. We have to be intentional, right? Because we are always believing something or someone. And if we're not careful, then those beliefs could steer our results in a direction that we don't want to go. So The untrue belief we talked about yesterday is I am not enough, right? If we are believing that and not paying attention to it, excuse me, and not calling it out, where is that going to steer our emotions, our execution, our action or inaction, and our results? It's not going to go in the direction of fruitfulness. It's probably going to go in the hamster wheel, right, of busyness, because we're trying to make up for the fact that we don't feel like we're enough. Or what are we doing? We could be just binging. Like sometimes it's just too much, and I just go and grab Haagen-Dazs and Netflix, right? But when we take a few minutes in that daily CEO meeting to do a steer belief map, to identify those wrong beliefs, to say, okay, what am I believing about what God's called me to and who I am? Then that will keep us from wasting that time, energy, resources all day long. Okay. And especially on the busy days, I'm going to encourage you, sometimes it's easy to be like, I don't have time for this today. I'm going to say we don't have time not to do it, right? Because just taking a few minutes to get our heart and mind right and transformed, like we talked about from Romans yesterday, is going to direct where our time goes in the rest of our day. Because that confidence in who you are as a CEO is going to lead to the clarity we're talking about today around what you do as a CEO and what you don't do, what is not yours to do. So first thing I want you to commit to is that daily CEO meeting with God before you listen to other voices or before you pick up your to-do list, because that's what's going to direct it. So if you're willing to commit to that, I'm not going to be looking over your shoulder, to make sure you check the box. This is between you and him. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, 7 days a week. Maybe it's 5 days a week. Maybe it's 3 days a week. But like, who is committed to doing a regular, we'll say regular, CEO meeting with God? Drop CEO in the chat, right? Because this is what's going to make the biggest difference, is building that belief. Because if not, we're going to have the problem of the Skittles and the oranges. And I'm just going to give you the quick version of this illustration before we go any further. This looks really pretty. Those of you can see all of my nice brightly colored Skittles that my husband keeps eating off the tops, so I have to watch the level of them. And then these oranges that are in here. But there's an illustration that if I had a little bit more space and time, I would show you, where if we took everything out of here and we put the Skittles in one jar, we put the oranges in the other, okay? We know the difference between Skittles and oranges, right? Skittles, I don't know if this is true, but I actually had this confirmed in 2 different sources. So it may be true, it may not be true, but they're supposed to be like the unhealthiest candy out there. Like, there is no nutritional value in a Skittle, let's be honest, right? It is all artificial color, artificial sweeteners, and sugar. So it's not adding any value. But those oranges, especially when we're going through cold season, right? Through the winter and into the spring and things like that, those have a lot of nutrients, right? But here's what happens. Oftentimes, the Skittles, which are representative of all the random things in life that come up, right? Those get put in first. And so I did this illustration actually with some students not too long ago, where I took the Skittles and I poured all the Skittles in first. We talked about all the random things that, pop up through their phone or pop up in their mind or pop up, whatever. And then we said, okay, so here are some of the things that matter, like our faith walk, like our family, like our relationships, like our business, like our wellness, guess what? There wasn't room for the oranges because the Skittles were taking up so much space. But here's what's so cool. I poured everything back out into these 2 different containers. And then we put the oranges in first. We said, let's put what matters in first, right? Guess what? There was room for all those oranges. All 8 of them are in here, okay? And I then took that jar of Skittles that I had and I poured it in, and you can see here how they just kind of like fill in the gaps. They fill in the space around, and literally every single Skittle fit in, which is just such a great reminder, right? That when we are focusing on what matters first, yes, there will be Skittles. Yes, there will be all these random things that come up and happen, because welcome to life. We live in a really busy, distracting, and random world, and it's going to happen, right? But if we're not putting the oranges in first, one of those is your CEO time, right, with him. If in your business, when you're sitting down to work, you're not putting in the oranges first, what happens? The Skittles of scroll hole, right? And all of a sudden I had somebody share the other day, like she sat down to do something, and then it was like an hour and a half later that all this time had gone away because she had, gotten stuck in that black hole, right? And then we wonder why we feel like we don't have enough time for the things that we say matter. So let's get some clarity around all of this, okay? So turn to day 2, because the first thing we're going to do is identify what's our problem. Okay, our problem is we don't have clarity around what should be on our to-do list and what goes on our to-don't list. Wait, a to-don't list? Like, is that even a thing? Have you ever heard of a to-don't list? Who has a to-do list, right? Like, probably all of us. Who has a to-don't list? Like, wow, what if you actually had like a list of things that like they came across your mind, or as they came across your inbox or as they came across your phone or wherever they're coming from, you're like, oh, that's a to-don't. That's something I don't need to do. And you actually wrote it down on the to-don't list so that you would remember the next time it came across. Like today, I'm going to give you some permission to put some things on your to-don't list, right? As a CEO of your business, because just because it pops up across your screen or somebody else is doing it or thinks you should, or you even think you should, doesn't mean that you have to do it. A lot of that just produces that randomness. A lot of that turns into Skittles for us, but not a lot of the fruit, the oranges. Okay. But the question is, how do you know what goes on your to-do list and what goes on your to-don't list? Well, here's where, like I said, it starts with what we did yesterday, knowing who you are as a CEO. It starts with the confidence in who you are and what you're called to, because when you don't know who you are, you're always questioning, you're always doubting, you're always comparing, and then what are you doing? You're running in circles, listening to all the voices, trying to validate who you are and what you should be doing, and then you're just overwhelmed, and eventually you crash and burn out, or you give up and you do nothing, okay? But that's not what CEOs do. Right? Like if you were literally getting hired on as a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, you would have confidence in who you were hired to be. You would know your roles and responsibilities. When you walked into your office each day, you would know what you're called to do because you know the mission and the vision and where you're going, right? And that is going to direct when and what tasks get your attention and what don't. And you're not just listening to everyone. But for some reason, we, especially as solo and entrepreneurs, we listen to everybody else and we try to do every other thing, right? I love the fact that you mentioned having a mental don't list, but yeah, write it down. And how many of us, here's another one that just made me think of, so thanks for putting that in the chat. How many of us have a mental to-do list? Because here's the thing, so often we try to keep it all in our head, and guess what? It takes up space so that it makes it harder to make decisions. It makes it harder to remember. It makes it literally makes everything harder when we're trying to keep it all in our head, even though we think we've got it, right? So there's something about getting out of your head and getting it down somewhere. Now, I am not a proponent of living by a to-do list. Inside of my program, I teach you how to eliminate about 90% of your to-do list, because here's the thing. Most of the things that you should be doing are probably on repeats. It's not just a one and done thing. The one and done things that you do once and then you never think about it again, then yes, right? But those things that you are, doing on a regular basis need to belong somewhere. And that's something that we can get into a little bit later. But we live in this day and age. I was thinking about this today, that like, if you wanted to hear, right, like what someone else was doing or not doing or whatever, right, you would have to literally like register for an event or drive or fly somewhere, sit in a session and hear all of this, right? Go back home and that type of thing. But then all of a sudden we thought, well, no, let's get things in people's hands, right? So we have started with cassette tapes. Anybody remember those? Or CD and DVD trainings, right? Books and magazines, so now I didn't have to go somewhere. It could come to me, but I had to go purchase them or check them out or things like that. But now we've got this device that follows us around everywhere. And there are podcasts and YouTube channels and apps and social media feeds and ads and virtual summits. There are literally voices everywhere all the time. We could spend all of our time listening to other people's ideas about what we should do. And I don't know about you, but that doesn't, at some point it inspires me to add it to all my lists, but then I eventually get overwhelmed and I like have to tune it out. Right. And that was really what I did for a long time, is that I was listening to all of those should do's for my business. And so I'd be curious to hear, what kinds of things are you hearing people say that you should do for your business? Drop one or two in the chat. I'd love to hear, what are some of the voices around us saying? What are some of the things that we're hearing? Right now, we're not judging whether they're right or wrong, whether they're good or bad, whether it's yours or not. Just what are the things that you are doing? And while I'm looking at the chat, I do not call it a to-do list anymore. I call it a purpose list. I love that, right? And even better, right? Like putting it into these times of our day. So I know, like you said, what is the purpose right now? What is it that I am called to do in this time? What's the time for? We'll talk about that tomorrow. Okay, so some things I'm seeing: sharpen up my brand on social media, right? Yes, make everything flow. So everywhere they go, if they see me on 3 different platforms, then they're seeing the same thing and they know they're in the right place. Another one, posting on social media multiple times a week. At one point, they were saying multiple times a day. I remember being part of a program that was teaching 5 times a day back in the day. Like, ain't nobody got time for that, right? Like literally when I was doing that, I didn't do fully everything they said, but I was trying. Like it was all my day was consumed with posting and content and things like that. Yes, multiple reels a day, right? You have to be capturing every moment and everything that's happening because you have to be relatable and people need to know all these things, right? And so what happens is we just keep adding all these things to our list because they sound good, or this person is successful. It worked for them. It's what other people are doing. And we think it's going to make us successful, right? If I'm doing this, then it's going to change what results I'm getting. But when I look back, I really wasted a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of energy, right, on things that didn't move the needle and that really just took up time. And ultimately sacrificed relationships, my wellness, right, my own time, my joy. It was not worth it. So the problem is that when we don't have clarity as a CEO, it leads to wasted time, resources, energy, and we're not seeing any fruit. Okay, has anyone else wasted time, energy in the past on should do's that didn't produce fruit, right? Drop me in the chat so I know that I'm not alone in that. Like I shudder to think about how many hours I spent doing things, how much money I invested in different things, right? And it really didn't get me anywhere. So our question today is, how do you know what you should do? How do you know what you should do? Okay, now remember that there are things that, well, let me think about this and how to say this. Oftentimes when we talked about should do's, it's because somebody else is like putting that on us, right? And we're feeling this outside thing or this obligation or something like that from the inside. But there are things that, yes, you are called to do. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. So how do you know what you should do? Being, how do you know what you are called to? And what is going to help you produce the fruit that you are called to? The first thing is going to be our wrong beliefs, okay? Because that's always where we're going to get stuck first. And our wrong belief number two, or untrue belief number two, is that I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough. Do you see how that's a natural progression from the one from yesterday? I am not enough. If I believe I'm not enough, right? And it looks like somebody else is, and they're doing this, therefore I'm not doing enough, therefore I need to do that. And then, when I listen to and compare myself with, multiple people, now I've got this huge long list, right? But it really comes down to me believing I'm not doing enough. And so I'm going to really just kind of quick walk you through a steer belief map because I want to make sure we kind of catch this, right, before we let this steer our stuff in the wrong direction. So if you want to write one down, you can do it just on the side of your notes and just put steer vertically. If you just want to listen, that's fine too. But our situation is our business to-do list, right? And our thought is, I'm not doing enough, right? And so what does that lead to, right? It leads to, feeling like frustrated, maybe resentful that, we are trying to do things and it's still not producing fruit, or why does she have this and I don't, or, I just can't, I don't know, and we just kind of get ourselves in that cycle then. So then our execution goes to the hamster wheel or the Haagen-Dazs, right? And our results are that, yeah, I feel like I'm not doing enough. I'm overwhelmed by the fact that I'm not doing enough. So I keep putting more things on my list, hoping that I'll do enough to finally see the results that I'm looking for. And it just gets longer and I just get more tired and nothing really ever changes or comes to fruition. Right. But as I was praying over this one in my life, in my business, God brought 2 Peter 1:3 to mind to me, which says, his divine power has given us everything we need for a godly life through our knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and goodness, right? Notice that it's not all that I need to do what the world around me says or to look good in the world's eyes, right? He has given me everything I need, right? So I don't have to look anywhere else and I have to do all these other things, but what is it that he has called me to, right? And that's the voice that I am listening to. And so then we look at our business to-do list, right? And we say, okay, my new thought is, well, because he called me and equipped me, and my goal is to glorify him, then I don't have to be doing all these things to please all these other people or to please an algorithm or to please, like the expert or whatever it is to check the box. And now I'm feeling empowered, encouraged, expectant, right? Because he has given me everything that I need for what I'm called to. So now I don't feel the rush. I can sit. I can ask for wisdom. I can listen, take the time to listen instead of feeling like I don't got time for this. I can look around and notice like where I see him directing and guiding, right? And then take action on what he's given me to do and what he's called me to. And in that process, as I'm growing my knowledge of him, right, I'm realizing it's not about me doing more, right? It's about me trusting and knowing him more. And then he's showing me where it is that I should be. So always, always, always grab where is this wrong belief? Where is this untrue belief taking me before it takes us down a road that, we don't want to be on. And it takes a whole lot more work to get back there. So the more often we can do that, the more often we can take those thoughts captive to grab onto them before they get us there, then the better it's going to be. But sometimes we get in the spiral. Sometimes we get down, we're not even paying attention, or, so much is happening that we can't even see it. It's never too late. And this is what I love, is that, we can submit that to him, we can take that to him, and he can change things, in an instant, even though we maybe have been spiraling in something for a long time. So let's go back to the question of how do I know what I should do or not do, right? It starts with knowing who you are, right? And also where you're going, where you're called to go, right? I want you to think about the last time you took a road trip. We just took a road trip over Easter weekend to go visit two of our kids that live kind of close to each other. So we kind of like got a 2-for-1. We didn't just hop in the car and hope we ended up there, right? We decided where we were going. Back in the day, true story, when I graduated from college, I'd already gotten a teaching job, so that didn't start till August. So my summer job that summer was working for Pathfinder Express. So do you know what I did? People would call in to my office. They would tell me where they lived and where they wanted to go on their trip. I would route it in the computer, print out the directions, and mail them to them. Hopefully they did this in time so they could actually have these instructions in hand, and then they're having to look at a piece of paper, as they're driving down the highway. And I can't tell you how many times I got phone calls from people that were lost somewhere, not so because of the directions I sent, but just, lost and needed someone to help them, find it, right? So yes, things have changed. We now have GPS that you don't have to know every turn before you get in the car, right? But you do have something that is guiding you, right? Yes, MapQuest is another way. That was when people didn't have to call in. You could actually go online and do it yourself. And then, a job like mine was obsolete, but I was teaching by then, so I didn't really care. But yeah, right. But here's what happens. So as you're on that road trip, there will be things that you encounter. Okay. No one probably here has ever been on a long road trip, unless it was just from here to the grocery store. And even then, maybe this happens, right? That you don't run into traffic, you don't run into construction, you don't run into some kind of weather or detours or things like that, right? But when you know where you're going and what your purpose is, you know best how to respond to those things that come up to keep you on the right road, right? To keep you on track. You may have to go around a little bit, but it's going to bring you back because you know where you're going. But then what about all those points of interest in the tourist traps? What if you literally got off every single time there was a billboard for something, right? You would never get there. You would waste a lot of time, a lot of money, and a frustration because you would be going in every which direction. Everything looks great, all the shiny objects, right? And the same thing happens in our business, right? When I don't have that clear direction on where I'm going, who I am and where I'm going, then yeah, everything looks great. And I'm going to start turning off in a whole bunch of different places. So one of the things for those of you who are going to decide to come into the Redeemed Midlife CEO is we start with your with God vision for your life and your business. Do you know where you're going, right? And then are you making decisions that are keeping you on track with that, right? And do you trust him to give you discernment along the way in doing that as well? So that's something to look forward to. As I was thinking about this, right, I was thinking about all these things that are asking for our time and attention, right? Either directly or indirectly. I thought about the fact that sometimes we say yes too much. If you say yes too much, put yes in the chat. This is me raising both hands, right? Yeah, I can do that. Sure, I can do that. Oh, that's one more thing. That's no big deal. I say yes out of obligation. I say yes out of, I really want to serve, but not thinking through it or whatever, right? There's so many reasons we say yes to things in life and in business that can really get us off track. And so I pulled out one of the books that we use inside the CEO book club called The Best Yes by Lisa TerKeurst. If you haven't read this yet, this is a great book. If you're in the program or coming in the program, we're going to read this together. And there's something about reading and discussing with other people that helps you have a deeper experience. But her tagline is making wise decisions in the midst of endless demands. Could that relate to you in your life or to in your business? Are there endless demands? Is there always someone or something that you could be saying yes to? And what would happen if you gave a yes to every single one of them and you weren't actually wise and discerning? And then you won't be able to see this, but kind of going around the side, she's got these little phrases that say, I dread saying yes, but I feel powerless to say no. Wow. Anyone relate to that? I'm drowning in the regrets of too many commitments. I'm a little overwhelmed and a lot worn out. I hope there's more to life than my to-do list, right? Can you relate? There are a lot of demands and a lot of distractions that are going on all over the place. And she says this is related to a universal condition that you and I have in our life and in our business. And it's what she calls the disease to please, right? I have all these voices, right? And including my own. And I just want to make everybody happy because it feels good in the moment, right? But if we say yes to the endless demands and distractions, we're not really getting anywhere, right? And here's the other thing to remember. Every time I say yes, every time you say yes to something, you are also inadvertently saying no to a bunch of other things, and usually not just one, right? So when I say yes to one more networking event, when I say yes to one more social media platform, when I say yes to one more, meeting or one more program or one more whatever that isn't yours to do, that isn't taking you in the right direction, what are you inadvertently saying no to in your business? And then also, like, what's that doing to your time and attention when it comes to your family, your friendships, your wellness, right? Your home, like all these other areas of our life. Sometimes it feels really good to say yes, right? It feels good to be able to say yes to people, but we have to ask the question is, where's this yes leading? So I have a quick story to share with you about my sister-in-law. She had obviously read this book before I did. And I had asked her if she would help me with a project for the business that I was working on at the time. And she usually doesn't respond immediately to texts and messages. That's fine. And when she got back with me, she said, I'm sorry. Right now, that is not my best yes. And I had not read the book yet. And at first, do you want to know how I felt? I was a little like, what? I'm your sister-in-law. This wouldn't be more than 2 hours of your life, right? To be able to help me out with this, what this event was that I was, asking if she would help me out with. And so at first there was a little bit of that, I didn't like that. But the more I thought about it, I thought, you know what? I'm really glad she said that because I wouldn't have wanted her to give me a yes out of obligation. Right? I wouldn't have wanted her to give me a half yes. I wouldn't have wanted her to give a yes and then have this ripple effect in all these no's in her life. And then she's resentful or she's, frustrated, with me. That wasn't going to be best for both of us. Right. So right now, then I read the book and I was like, oh, she obviously had read this book already. Right. I'm giving you permission to not say yes. In fact, here's what I'm going to challenge you to do. Slow down your yes. Let me say that again for effect. Slow down your yes. How many times do we jump into a yes too quickly? In the moment, it feels good. It looks good. It's shiny. It's, we love the fact that we were asked or included or came across our path and, oh my goodness, maybe this is what I'm looking for, right? And we just say yes, but we don't think through the ripple effect. We don't think through the cost of time or energy or resources or attention, right, that this is going to have and what that might take away from. And then we feel that regret or that resentment, down the road, and we realize, gosh, this has just been a waste of my time and energy. And really, I'm not even really doing what I'm supposed to be doing to help, even if it was to help somebody else, right? So permission to not say yes by slowing down your yes first before you say it. And when you say a yes to something, whether it's to another person for something they're asking, would you be on this committee at church? Would you help, help with this thing at school? Would you lead this meeting for our team or whatever it is? It's okay to slow it down. And it's okay to do what my sister-in-law did and say, you know what, right now, this is not my best yes. Okay. And also, I'm going to give you permission right now to un-yes. Because right now you may be going, I've said yes to some things and they're really not my best yes, but I don't feel like I can get out of it. Remember how we said yesterday, you control more than you think you do, right? If you said yes, you can say un-yes. Now, yes, it may not feel good in the moment, especially if it was to someone else and you're going to have to go to them and say, I'm sorry, right now, this is not my best yes. I wish that I could fully give you, what it is that you need, but I can't. And so I'm going to graciously bow out and leave space for someone who can. And yeah, they may not love that in the moment, but guess what? I think that they will be grateful that you did that versus them only getting, a half yes from you, right? Some of the yeses are just things that we've committed to ourselves, or those are easy. We can have that conversation with ourselves and we can cross it off the list. Okay. So in business, our best yes our CEO tasks. So if you look on the second page, it says CEO versus non-CEO tasks. Our best yes are those CEO tasks. And our not best yes are the non-CEO tasks, right? What is yours to say yes to right now in this season? And here's what I want you to know too. This is going to look different with every single person who's on here today, every single person who's listening to this, because we are in a different place personally. We're in different seasons of our life with different, things that need our attention. We're different seasons of our business. Our, what we do is different, right? So my best yes may not be your best yes, or it may not be your best yes right now. And that's okay. That's why we're not looking around us so much as we're looking up, right? What is it that is my best yes right now? What is my CEO task now? What are my non-CEO tasks? And some of those non-ones right now, maybe a never. And maybe this is never going to serve you. And so that's never going to get my time and attention. But it may be that down the road, when you've grown to a certain place, or you have some, some extra support, or you have some time that's freed up from something else, that it will turn into something that would be a best yes for you. So I want you, like, when opportunities come across your path, I want you thinking, is this a best yes? Is this a CEO task? Or is this right now not a best yes and not a CEO task? And the scary thing is going to be to go to those things you've already said yes to and evaluate those and be willing to step out how uncomfortable it feels to unyes from any of those things that are not CEO tasks. Because here's the thing. I remember when I was homeschooling, a friend of mine said to me, Lissa, you have to be home to homeschool. Right? Because I was saying yes to all these other things and then wondering why homeschooling time wasn't happening. Same thing happens in our business, right? Especially for those of us who work from home and have a virtual business that we can do anywhere, right? It gives so much flexibility, yes, which is great. But what happens, it's really easy for either us to say yes to all these things because, oh yeah, I can. Like, yes, I can go there in the middle of the day. Yes, I can do this. Yes, I can, or other people to put their requests on us because they're like, she doesn't have a 9-to-5 real job, therefore she's available, therefore I can, ask these things of her, right? And so then we're wondering why our business doesn't get the time that it needs and why we're not getting anywhere. Tomorrow we're going to talk about how do we make time for when we work and when we don't, because there are times that we're called not to work and we are called to pour out into other things and called to be poured into ourselves, right? So that's a piece of it as well. But yeah, so it's going to be maybe, like, where am I focusing on my best yes and those CEO tasks, and what are the ones that are not mine to have right now? Because if you were a CEO walking into your corner office with your really big desk and your comfy chair, like we talked about yesterday, right? You're not answering every phone call that comes in on the switchboard. That's somebody else is doing that. You're not cleaning the bathrooms. Somebody else is doing that. You're not sitting there organizing your files. Now, yes, you may do those things at other times, right? When it's absolute necessary and all of a sudden there's a flood. Yes, you're out there helping the janitor, right? If all of a sudden, the receptionist gets sick, maybe you're helping, right? Whatever. But you know when to work as a CEO and what your tasks are to say yes to in that time and what is not. Okay. And so we'll look a little bit more at our time tomorrow, but today it's about the what to do. Okay. Because as CEOs, we need to know when to take action, what to take action on and what not to. Okay. And we want to discern that. And the best way to do that is simply with a business audit, right? Because here's the thing. You can figure out what you're believing that you should do by looking at what you're doing. Right? Like, for example, let's go to the example of money. I was having this conversation with someone yesterday because there's so many parallels between time and money. If you want to know where your money is going and you feel like there's never enough, right? Why am I always robbing Peter to pay Paul? Why does it always feel like I get to the end of the month and there's, no more money? Then what are you going to do? You're going to go to your credit card statement. You're going to go to your bank account and you're going to see where is it going? What's getting my money, right? So what we want to do, so we can start deciding what's a CEO task, what's not, is like, what am I actually doing, right? What is it that is getting my time? Is a great question to ask. What's getting too much of your time? Okay. Yeah. What is it that is taking up way more than it should be? What are you not making time for? Or what keeps getting pushed off? Right? What do you keep saying I should do that and we don't get there, right? The only way to know where to invest your time moving forward is to take a pause and look at where it's been going, right? Because otherwise nothing's going to change. And that is actually something that we address in the CEO Find the Time audit bonus that you get when you're part of this workshop. We're going to look at where has your time been going? And I have some questions for you about that. And then we're going to look at where, looking forward, is God saying your time should go? And you want your time to go as you're partnering with him to live this life and build this business. And there's some questions that we look through when it comes to that, right? And this one thing, stopping to pause to notice what's happening, right? It doesn't feel good, right? Nobody likes like looking up, open up the bank account and seeing exactly where it's going, because you see Amazon on there way too often, right? Or Starbucks on there way too often, or whatever it is that's happening way too often. But it does bring your level of awareness to, wow, a lot of my money is going to this place. And the same thing around our time and our tasks. A lot of my time is going to this. So if you haven't grabbed your CEO Find the Time audit, let me drop the link in the chat for those of you who are on live. It's also inside of the community as well. So I encourage you to schedule that, because it's going to be a good opportunity for you to pause and take a look at this. And that way you're not wasting hours and dollars, right? You're investing them in where it's supposed to be. Now, nobody likes audits, right? Because, you think about like a typical, business, right? Some guy walks around with glasses and a clipboard, maybe a lab coat, and he's just watching and writing things down and nodding his head. But it is necessary in a big corporation to ensure that resources are being used wisely, right? And that the company is moving in the right direction. So there are two things that I want you to be looking at as you're looking at what kinds of tasks you're doing right now. The first is, what is being done? Okay, what is the task? And I want you to just be very neutral, almost like you're a reporter, right? You're just noticing. You're not judging, whether it was good or bad or whatever. You're just noticing the things that are being done. Okay, you're noticing, when is it being done? What's being done, right? Who's doing it? Probably mostly you if you're a solopreneur, but maybe you have some other people that help you with a few different things. But it's just paying attention to what's being done. And here's one I want you to track. I want you to start paying attention to. How much stuff is happening on screens, right? And where is that taking you? You may go on there to do the business post, but then do you get lost in the scroll hole? And then all of a sudden, you spent all of this time doing all these things that you don't even know, it didn't take you anywhere, right? So what is being done is the first part, right? I have to be aware of that. Where is our time going? What tasks am I actually doing with this time that I have? The second one is, what's the result, right? Like, what is the outcome of what it is that I'm doing? And I heard the statistic the other day I thought was really interesting. 83% of entrepreneurs never track their numbers, and they wonder why they don't see growth. 83%, right? Like, we just keep doing stuff. We just keep doing stuff. How many of us just keep doing stuff, hoping it's working, because I don't have time to go and check the numbers, but we're really just wasting time on things that really aren't ours to do. Right? So here are a couple of ideas of things that would be good things to track that would be showing if there's growth, right? Of course, your revenue, what's coming in, and also your expenses, what's going out. So looking at, what's happening in the area of that. Second one, how many new leads are you bringing in? Like, how many, I don't just need likes and comments, right? But actually people who are like coming and having conversations, right? The third one is, how many new clients or customers are you bringing in? And then the fourth one is, how many clients are what are the client and customer results, like the tangible ones, right? And so find a really simple system as you're tracking the things that you're doing, right? So here's what I would recommend. You grab a piece of paper, a notebook, and just keep it next to you for the next 24 hours. And you could even have two columns, one be a life and one be a business, right? And every time you do something, write it down. You're not judging it or whatever, you're just jotting it down, so you're bringing awareness to it. Now, one thing happens, first of all, just so you know, have you ever done a food diary before, where you have to write down everything you eat for like a certain period of time? How many of you have actually thought twice before you ate that, because you were going to have to write it down? So already it's starting to work on the awareness, right? It's okay if this makes you go, wait, I'm not going to pick up my phone right now, because that's not going to take me where I want to go. And I don't want to have to write that down. Okay, great, good. It did that. But I want you paying attention to what you're doing, ideally in life and business, but we're focusing more on the business side of things this week, right? What things am I actually doing? And then notice patterns. Like, is this something that's, how often is this happening? So you can put hash marks, have little tally marks next to things that are happening repeatedly, over a period of time. Maybe you don't realize how much time you're giving to something, or you're like, wow, I'm only doing that like once in a while. Like, okay, noticing those patterns, right? And then just use a really simple system for, what's the return of this task? Not everything is going to have a direct return, but is it taking me, yes, towards a good return, put a plus sign in front of it? Is it taking me to a not good return or a complete waste of time and there's nothing coming from it, put a minus next to it? If you're not sure, I like to put a circle because it kind of leaves an open spot so I can kind of maybe do a little processing and paying attention to where that is that's going. Okay, so I want you, first step is going to be do an audit. What am I doing? And what's the return on that? Don't overthink it. It's just getting it down on paper. Because again, just like with what we talked about earlier with our thoughts, if it's not down on paper, it's really hard to do something with it. And now, okay, what do we do once I'm looking at this list and going, okay, there's a lot of stuff I'm doing. Should it all really be here? Right? We start asking questions like, does this all really matter? Does it all matter equally? Does it all matter at the same time? Right? The answer is probably no. There are probably things on there that don't matter at all, or that matter less, or that don't matter now, or that are just taking valuable time, resources, and energy away from other things in your business or in your life. So the CEO tool that I'm going to show you today is very simple. It's called the 4 Ds. Okay. And this is a way that once you have a list, then this is an easy tool to use with. So I'm going to go through what these 4 categories are so you know what they are. And then this is going to be part of your CEO implementation here that we'll go over in just a minute. Okay, so the first one is delete. These are those should do's. Now, when I say those should do's in quotes, like we're talking the ones we talked about yesterday, like I think I should do this, but it literally is just weighing down everything else. Okay, there are things on your list that could literally just be deleted. They don't matter. They are not moving the needle. They are only distracting time and resources. The world will not spin off its axis. You are not going to all of a sudden, fall off the face of the planet. No one really needs to do it. It doesn't really matter if it happens. It has little to no ROI, right? So this is telling you who should do it, what should they do, and when. Well, guess what? No one needs to do it, and the answer is never. So permission, and I'm going to challenge you today, I'll give you a sneak peek at this, is to find one thing, because this one's the hardest. I think the hardest is for us is to get rid of something because we think everything matters. So your assignment today is going to be to find one thing that you can delete, one thing you're going to stop doing or no longer do, or don't feel guilty about the fact that you never get around to it. Okay. And we're going to get that off the list because it doesn't matter. The second one is delegate. Those are things that I call the could do's. So these are things that they do matter, but they, in some ways, may take more time than you have to get the results. But here's the other thing. So you could do it or not do it, and it's maybe not going to make a huge difference. But the other thing is, too, is that maybe somebody else could do this, right? It's like, what are those things that, yeah, maybe I could delegate, or I could create a system around, or I could swap, with someone. Someone told me yesterday that she feels called to take things off other plates so that they can focus on their passions. I was like, girl, you're like my best friend, right? Like, yes, when I have to spend all this time doing a lot of these back end type things, I'm not as focused in the front end things that I know only I can do. So this one is, again, sometimes going to be a challenge because it feels like, well, it's not that big of a deal. It's just a little thing. I don't mind doing it, right? But they all add up, right? Even if it just takes you 5 minutes, every 5-minute thing adds up, right? And it's again, bandwidth when it comes to mental capacity and things like that, but is there a way by creating a system, hiring someone, making a swap, that there's some way to delegate this task so it's not always on your workload? Okay. Now, a lot of people who I work with are solopreneurs. And right now you're like, Lissa, everything is on my shoulders and I don't have the income to pay someone else. Okay. So, well, number one, get creative in the meantime. Is there a way that you can swap or automate or something like that? And number two, put this on I'm going to delegate this at one point, right? What is it? As I'm going through this workshop series, I've been making a list of what are the things I'm going to delegate next time so I can focus on the things only I can do. And so maybe it's not a right now that you can delegate it, but maybe it's a later. Or maybe in order for you to have time to work on your business, you're needing to delegate some household things or some other things to other people so that you can spend this focus time here and that the other thing still gets done. It's okay to share with a friend, a family member, a spouse, a child, whatever, what a need is and ask them to step up and help, right? So, okay, the next one is delay. These are what I call the will do's because these do matter and you will do them. But right now is not the time. Either because it's not your best yes and something else needs your time, or because you have so many other things going on right now, it can't get your best yes. So this is a little bit different than procrastinating. Procrastinating is I will do it. I should be doing it now, but I just keep putting it off. An intentional delay is now is not the time. I'm going to literally pick this item up off my calendar, my to-do list. I'm going to put this over here in this time frame so that I will come back and revisit at that time. Maybe it's that this week is really full and I can't even handle this right now, so I'm going to revisit this next week. Maybe it's this month does not give me time for this. I'm going to revisit this next month. And so you put it at the beginning of the month. Maybe it's next quarter. Maybe it's next year. You know, maybe you don't even know for sure what the time frame is on it. So give it some arbitrary time frame. And when that time comes, then readdress, is now the time. And does this still matter? So one of my friends, when she heard me describe this, she said, I have kind of something I do like that too. Every time I move something, I put a star next to it. And if it gets 3 stars, then I know it really didn't matter. If it was that easy for me to delay that many times, then it probably didn't matter. So either you delegate it or delete it, you know, or put it in a parking lot for, you know, some time down the road, just so you don't feel like you've actually, you know, you've lost it all the way. The last one is the delights. What are the get-tos, right? What are the things that do matter? And now is the time to give it your consistent attention. More on how and when to give it consistent attention tomorrow, right? These are your CEO tasks, and these are things that should be happening. Some of them are going to be delighting in and of themselves, right? Like it's life-giving to you, and it's also producing a result that is life-giving, right? So you kind of look at it from both ways. Sometimes it's, yeah, maybe I don't love everything about it, but I know that I know that I know this is moving towards, you know, this fruit. And wow, that fruit is juicy and fresh, and this is exactly where I'm going. And so we want to make sure that there are more of those delights and the get-tos and the things that are moving us in that direction than the have-tos and the should-dos that are taking up that time and space, right? So as I was thinking about this, as we're kind of closing this down, I was just thinking about Christ, right? Like he had a lot of people telling him what he should do, right? He had Pharisees, teachers of the law. He had crowds that wanted miracles done for them and wanted healings. He had some people who truly believed and some people who just wanted to see the, you know, the flashy guy who came into town. There were even like governors and rulers who had heard about him, right? We talked yesterday about how Satan, you know, wanted him to do things, right? Everyone had an opinion or a request or a demand about what he should do or what he shouldn't do, right? Who he should talk to or who he shouldn't talk to, when he should do something, when he shouldn't do something, right? Even including his disciples, including those who were closest to him, who still in their humanness didn't fully comprehend exactly who he was and what was going on and all of that, right? Until all of it came together. And then all of a sudden they were like, oh, right? So could you imagine if he said yes to every single should do that came across his path? If he said yes to every single request that came up, you know, throughout his day, he, you know, he would be all over the place, right? But he didn't. Why? Because he understood who he was and what his purpose was. And he spent time with the Father. We often read about how going away, right, to spend time with the Lord, right? And his disciples even coming to find him and saying, okay, the crowds are waiting for you. We need to go to this. And he's like, nope, this is what I'm called to do. And this is where we're going. Even though they were like, what? I think you should do this, right? But it was because he knew who he was and he knew what he was called to. And so I want to leave you with that as we're closing up today, because as a CEO, that's where again comes back to that foundational belief of who am I and what am I called to? And that then is going to determine what is going to get your yes and what's not. What is your best yes and what's a half yes? What is your CEO task and what is your non-CEO task, right? And taking those, guess what? Here's the thing. We don't do this on our own, right? We have a chairman of the board who knows everything, who can see farther than we can, and who is ready and willing to help us to gain that wisdom and to have discernment about what to say yes to and what not to. What are our CEO tasks when I'm sitting down to work, when I'm focusing on this business, and what aren't? What's for now in this season and what isn't, right? And the grace to be able to let it go and be okay and not keep coming back to that untrue belief that I'm not doing enough, because that's where the enemy wants to keep us. He wants to keep us in the, I feel like I'm not enough. I feel like I'm not doing enough. And then I'm just spinning my wheels, right? And I'm just wasting time, energy, resources somewhere else. I'm not a threat to the kingdom. I'm not doing anything that's producing fruit, right? I'm just over here, just exhausting myself and not really getting anywhere. And that's not what he has for us, right? When we have that confidence in who we are and whose we are and what we're called to, now when those opportunities come across our path, Number one, we have a little bit, hopefully more discernment about what to say yes to and what's a CEO task and what's not. And we have someone that we can go to and ask for help with that. So as we wind up, I'm going to give you guys your homework here in just a second. I'd love to hear from you because yesterday we had some great things that you shared in the chat, but what was an aha for you today? When you think back over our time today, what was an aha that you have had that was what you needed to hear? I would love for you to drop that in the chat so we can look at that. And I just want to, as you're doing that, I want to remind you, it doesn't have to take crashing, burning out, or getting in crisis mode or diagnosis to change things, right? You can choose to plug into, right, the source of all wisdom and power that we need, and also into, right, a system and support that is going to help you discern what are your CEO tasks for this season of your life and business and what aren't, and to be able to let those go, right? So if that's something that, you know, as you're thinking about, gosh, yeah, left on my own, I tend to drift and I tend to get distracted and I tend to forget and I tend to like all of a sudden be over here in left field again, then I want to really encourage you to just to think about, yeah, what it is that you need. We'll talk a little bit more about this on open house day, but I am opening up applications to join the Redeem Midlife CEO because this is the place where we are coming together. And you're going to find those resources that are based on biblical truth, and you're going to find the connection and the coaching and the support that you need. It's going to keep you connected to what it is that you're called to. And so a couple of really quick things that I just want to share with you guys first before I start sharing this out publicly is that what I always like to do is say, how can I gift those who are ready to make CEO decisions and to take CEO action? And so there are two things that God and I sat down together in our CEO meeting and decided on. The first is that the first 5 CEOs who jump into the program before April 15th, wink, wink, speaking of which, this would be a great way to invest your tax return and get a return, right? So that you're producing more of the income that you want by this time next year. You're going to get an extra discount. You're going to get an extra $497 off, whether you pay in full or whether you do a payment plan. So that's going to be available to the first 5 people who come in before April 15th. And as an extra bonus for anyone who comes in by that date as well, you're going to get a 1-hour CEO business audit where we're going to look at where you are. We're going to look at what God's calling you to focus on and the best way to invest your time so that you can get there. So you're not wasting your time and your energy and your resources with all these other yeses, all these non-CEO tasks that are not yours to do, that are really not moving you in the right direction and keeping you going in circles. So I hope that will be really helpful to really lay that foundation. So that way you're not just hoping that you're going to be going in the right direction, but you're knowing where exactly to be putting your time. So if you want to be one of the first to access those bonuses, then you have to apply. Here's the thing. I don't let anybody who wants be in the program because I want to make sure that we are a good fit for each other. So I'll drop that link in the chat. It's redeemhertime.com/coaching. You can click on any button there that says apply. And if you are still like, you know, I have some questions, I want to talk a little bit more about where I am, there are buttons on that page as well that are to schedule a call. And we can talk more about where you are and where God's calling you and things like that. So, okay, I want to look at some of the things that came up today. I like the idea of doing a time audit. Yes, writing it down where my time is going without judgment. That's the key, right? Because when we start judging ourselves, we start, sometimes you hear shooting all over ourselves, then, you know, we just start feeling bad and we're starting to spend our time in the wrong direction. It's going to take us in the wrong direction. So yes, being aware of what things we're doing or not doing and where our time is going or not going is going to be that first step, right? And then using the 4 Ds to be able to go through what those things are once you have them. I love this is not my best yes. It's a softer way to say no to something. Yes, right? Because yes, we feel bad saying no to something. And so this is a great way to really look at, why am I saying yes instead of just saying yes? So I pray that you walk away from today with permission and direction to let go of some should-dos, let go of some Skittles, right? To not just like make them look all pretty, but to actually declutter them, to get them off and away and start listening to his voice about what to hold on to or what to add in, right? What it is that you're called to do that's going to move it in the right direction. Because here's the truth. Even though you feel like you're not doing enough, here's what he says. You don't have to do it all. You don't have to do it all in life or in business. And we can trust that when we are doing what we are called to, our CEO tasks, then we will see the fruit and the results. So, all right, so here's your homework. I mentioned it earlier. I'm just kind of reiterate it real fast. I want you to identify one task that you will delete because it's a non-CEO task or not a best yes. So it could be directly related to business, or it could be something in life that's going to free up a little bit of time and space for your business. Maybe you said yes to being on a committee, but it's taking up this time. And what would happen if I didn't have to go to those meetings on that regular basis, or something that you volunteered to do, or something like that? Sometimes it can be an immediate yes, right? Where just like, I'm bowing out of this today. Or it could be, you know what? I know that this is ending at the end of the month, or, the end of the school year, or the end of the season, or whatever. And so you start working towards that yes. But what is one task that you will delete because it's a non-CEO task or not a best yes? I'm going to encourage you. Number one, identify it. Number two, come post it on today's CEO implementation post inside the community, because that's where you're going to now you've declared it, right? It gives that extra level of accountability to doing it. And guess what? You're probably going to get inspired by other people and the things they're doing, right? Knowing you're not the only one, and maybe even be able to identify some other things that maybe you've been saying yes to that you shouldn't be right now, and that could free up some time and space for you. So tomorrow we will come back, and now that we've looked at who we are and what we are giving our time to, now it's like, okay, Lissa, but yeah, when my life is really busy and I've got all these things, right? Hopefully by kind of getting some things off our list, there's a little bit less, but what does it actually look like to be consistent with when I'm giving it time, and when I don't have to always be giving something related to my business time, because that's just as important. So we'll be back here tomorrow at the same time for that. I'll make sure this replay gets out to everyone, and it is not too late to share this or to invite a friend. So you can head to redeemhertime.com/declutter and make sure that you have all the links and resources that you need. So thanks everyone for being on today, and I will look forward to our time together in the community, and then seeing you here tomorrow.